Long before the dawn of humanity, this world functioned as a savage theater where instinct-driven engines of destruction held absolute dominion. From aquatic leviathans equipped with trap-like maws to the towering behemoths that laid claim to the earth, every single organism existed in a perpetual, desperate fight for survival. 500 million years of evolution have passed, leaving behind billions of vanished lives, yet a singular, haunting inquiry persists: which entity stands as the most fearsome nightmare to have ever stalked this planet? For over 4.5 billion years, the Earth has weathered an endless succession of annihilation and rebirth. It is only within the last 500 million years, however, that our world solidified into an unforgiving arena where survival required constant combat. Danger is the heartbeat of life. Without the pressure of predation, the engine of evolution would grind to a halt. From the earliest, simplest life forms drifting through primordial seas, a relentless arms race was ignited. Those possessing greater speed, sharper cunning, or raw, crushing power were favored by the odds, while the frail were swiftly reduced to the first meals in the chronicle of natural history. Imagine, hundreds of millions of years into the past, before even a single human footprint marred the mud that both the continents and the depths were governed by undisputed masters. Armored sea beasts of massive weight, giant dinosaurs whose screams rattled the firmament, and saber-toothed carnivores leaping through the drifts for a lethal strike, all took their turns at the zenith of the food chain. Every epoch featured its own sovereign of slaughter, whose very presence paralyzed all others with dread. We are about to embark on a temporal expedition, journeying 500 million years backward to that seminal moment when the first victim felt the cold stare of the planet's original hunter. Roughly 541 million years ago, the Earth remained a truly alien landscape. Forests were non-existent, birdsong was absent, and not a single creature had dared to step onto solid ground. Life was entirely sequestered beneath the tides within shallow, mineral-rich, temperate seas. Yet within this seemingly tranquil environment, a profound evolutionary ignition occurred: the Cambrian Explosion. Within a mere 20 million year window, a mere heartbeat in geological time, an avalanche of new life forms erupted into existence. Creatures manifested with complex jaws, legs, eyes, and hardened shells. For the first time, nature engineered a revolutionary mandate: the predator. As sunlight filtered through the shallows, primitive trilobites scoured the seafloor for algae and detritus. Unbeknownst to them, a watcher patrolled the deep blue, possessing eyes comparable to grapes, packed with thousands of shimmering lenses that mirrored the sun. Anomalocaris hovered, the inaugural apex hunter in Earth's history. While its name translates to strange shrimp, do not underestimate it. Anomalocaris spanned nearly 3 feet, making it a titanic nightmare in a world where everything else was measured in inches. It traversed the water with the effortless grace of a glider. Ahead of a circular mouth rimmed with serrated plates, 2 spiny appendages remained coiled, like death's own reaping hooks. These limbs struck when Anomalocaris engaged its side-mounted fins, whipping up miniature vortexes that sent prey into a spiral of panic. Upon spotting a trilobite, the hunter would dart forward, snare the target with its forelimbs, rotate its frame, and pulverize the tough shell with its jagged mouthparts. In a heartbeat, the serenity of the Cambrian seas was shattered, transforming them into the world's inaugural battlefield. From the perspective of evolutionary history, Anomalocaris represents a pivotal milestone. It established the original blueprint for a true carnivore, blending high-velocity movement, sophisticated optical tracking, and deliberate ambush tactics. Before its rise, life was largely passive, drifting with the tides while scavenging for fragments. Since the advent of Anomalocaris, however, the roles of hunter and hunted have been permanently etched into the genetic code of all subsequent life. Nor was it the only oddity. The Cambrian was an age of biological insanity that would seem plucked from a fantasy film. There was Opabenia soft-bodied, five-eyed, and equipped with a trunk reminiscent of an elephant's. Ending in a tiny grasping claw, Hallucigenia crawled along the bottom, its worm-like frame bristling with needle-sharp spines, while Weywaxia turned itself into a mobile fortress of bristles and scales to evade consumption. Nevertheless, Anomalocaris endured as the preeminent icon of this dawn. Next, the planet transitioned into the Devonian period, where the oceans curdled into bloody arenas, populated by creatures clad in steel-like plating and razor-edged mandibles. Around 419 million years ago, as continents began to coalesce and primordial forests took root along the shores, the seas became brutal arenas defined by teeth and armor. Paleontologists dubbed the Devonian the Age of Fish. In the shallow waters lining ancient coastlines, swarms of marine life thrived, but the scene would frequently tremble as a living block of metal surged from the gloom. Stretching nearly 10 meters, with a cranium encased in bone as dense as plate armor, Dunkleosteus stood as the most notorious monster of the Devonian, perhaps one of the most harrowing killers to ever patrol the earth. Rather than teeth, Dunkleosteus wielded two blade-sharp plates of bone that could clamp shut with a force reaching 6,000 newtons pressure, sufficient to shatter the defensive plating of any living rival. When its mouth hung open, its entire skull functioned like a hydraulic press, gaping wide in 1/10 of a second to generate a powerful suction that dragged prey into the void before snapping shut. Slaughter was delivered with efficient, bloodless velocity, more than a ruler of raw might. Dunkleosteus represented the evolutionary apex of the placoderms, or armored fish, the inaugural group to evolve complex jaw structures and true skeletal components. Its frame functioned like a submerged tank, with its chest and head protected by interlocking plates, while its sleek, flexible tail facilitated sudden, explosive bursts of speed. It was an indiscriminate glutton, devouring invertebrates, fish, and even members of its own species. Bite marks discovered on fossils from North America and Morocco confirmed that Dunkleosteus engaged in some of the earliest recorded acts of cannibalism. However, like every empire, the reign of the armored titan was finite. As sea levels shifted, oxygen was drained, and climate patterns fluctuated. The once bountiful oceans grew barren. As sustenance became scarce, the giant gradually vanished, ceding its place to creatures defined by greater intelligence and agility. The disappearance of Dunkleosteus signaled a fundamental turning point in biological history. The era of armored heavyweights concluded, ushering in a new epoch where life began its arduous struggle to adapt to the dryness, heat, and unpredictable demands of the land. Nearly 299 million years ago, the Earth plummeted into a period of profound upheaval. As the world's oceans began to recede, a sweltering, parched climate engulfed the globe. Massive land masses coalesced into Pangaea, a singular supercontinent that claimed most of the planet's territory. Its environment was characterized by merciless, infinite deserts, where dust storms raged without cease and daytime heat routinely climbed past 50 C. This was the Permian epoch, a stage where nature pushed every boundary of biological endurance. Across these desolate plains, ancient organisms were forced to undergo radical adaptations just to persist. Species transitioned from mere swimming to crawling, sprinting and stalking across the dry earth. During this era, the inaugural reptilian titans ascended, launching a dynasty that would persist for over 2 centuries of millions of years. Among the bizarre menagerie of the Permian, 2 archetypes emerged as definitive symbols of lethal power: the Dimetrodon and the Gorgonopsid. Dimetrodon stood as one of the planet's premier apex predators, growing up to 13 feet in length. Equipped with serrated dentition and a gargantuan dorsal sail that crested nearly 3 feet above its spine. This sail, constructed from elongated vertebral filaments, is widely believed to have served as a thermal regulator, a crucial evolutionary invention in the wildly volatile Permian climate. Each dawn, the Dimetrodon would remain statue still atop rocky outcrops, angling its sail to capture the sun's rays, thereby warming its blood before embarking on a hunt. As the day's heat intensified, the sail would be retreated into the shade, allowing the creature to shed excess warmth through the same biological interface. Through this mastery of thermoregulation, Dimetrodon achieved an efficiency that left other reptiles in the dust. When prey, usually amphibians or smaller reptiles, was detected, it would strike with sudden, lethal accuracy, driving its jagged teeth into the windpipe. Sustained pursuits were rendered unnecessary. A single, well-placed snap was usually enough to seal the victim's fate. As a prototype for endothermic predation, Dimetrodon stands as a remote ancestor to the mammalian lineage, including humanity itself. However, Dimetrodon was not the sole harbinger of doom. As the Permian drew toward its close, the Gorgonopsid entered the fray. Typically measuring between 6 and 10 feet, these hunters wielded twin, saber-like canines that reached lengths of 6 inches. If Dimetrodon functioned as nature's heavy-duty tank, the Gorgonopsid served as its lethal blade, possessing an agile, streamlined physique and upright, mammal-like limbs. It was built for explosive movement. During a hunt, silence was its greatest weapon. It would stalk through the sun-scorched scree, lying in wait for an unsuspecting target before launching a lightning-fast ambush. A single strike, and those twin daggers would perforate the throat. This world, however, lacked permanence approximately 252 million years ago. Cataclysmic volcanic activity in Siberia vented colossal volumes of carbon dioxide into the skies. Temperatures spiked, oceans were stripped of oxygen, and toxic acidification gripped the water. In a mere geological blink, several 100,000 years, 90% of the world's species were erased. This was the Great Dying, the most devastating extinction event in our history. Dimetrodon, Gorgonopsid, and an untold multitude of others were relegated to the fossil record, leaving behind nothing but impressions in the scorched Permian stone. Yet from these cinders, a handful of resilient, diminutive survivors clung to existence. They would serve as the genetic foundation for the coming age. As the planet eventually healed and the climate grew hospitable, a new lineage surged to the forefront: the dinosaurs. Following the Great Dying, 90% of all vitality had been extinguished. The seas had morphed into toxic, empty voids. Forests were reduced to charcoal, and the atmosphere turned thick with suffocating carbon. But nature does not concede. As atmospheric conditions slowly stabilized, the rains returned, and river systems began carving out fresh valleys. The small creatures that had weathered the apocalypse commenced a period of rapid evolutionary adjustment. Among them was a remarkable cadre of reptiles, agile, compact, and upright walking that began to command the wide open spaces. These were the Archosaurs, the progenitors of crocodiles, dinosaurs, and the birds of the future across the expansive plains. Pastosochus emerged as the Triasic's most significant predator, the inaugural true sovereign of the land. Reaching lengths of nearly 16 feet, it usually traversed the terrain on 4 powerful limbs, though it could rear onto 2 during a kill. Pastosochus was the nightmare of its epoch. Its jaws were lined with blade-like teeth, and its bite pressure rivaled that of the modern crocodile. When it exploded from the dust, its velocity was more than sufficient to fell prey in a matter of seconds. Fossils recovered in Germany and Texas reveal fractured bones, deep gouges, and puncture marks stark evidence of the brutal skirmishes waged between the era's inaugural terrestrial carnivores. Pastosochus functioned as far more than a mere hulking brute. It served as nature's inaugural experiment in bipedal predation, establishing the lethal blueprint that carnivorous dinosaurs would eventually refine to perfection. Yet the Triassic was not the exclusive domain of these towering forms. Across the arid crust and sparse woodlands, a more nimble contingent of organisms was undergoing a quiet transformation. These were the Coelophysis, recognized by the scientific community as the first true carnivorous dinosaurs, spanning roughly 6.5 feet. Coelophysis possessed a slender, aerodynamic frame, a tail utilized to maintain balance during high-speed maneuvers, and fine, serrated dentition engineered for tearing through muscle. While lacking the sheer bulk of a monster, they held an evolutionary trump card that no predecessor had ever mastered: speed, coupled with pack-based organization. When stalking quarry, they operated in coordinated cohorts, encircling their targets, a tactical refinement that wolves and lions would replicate hundreds of millions of years into the future. As the late Triassic took hold, the biosphere ignited with newfound vigor. Vegetation reclaimed the landscape, insect populations exploded, and the great reptiles entered a phase of massive diversification. While some lineages evolved into gargantuan rousers, others adapted into predatory sprinters. Marine dwellers like the ichthyosaurs even began to mirror the morphology of modern dolphins, providing definitive evidence of parallel evolution occurring across both land and sea. Meanwhile, beneath the suffocating layers of volcanic ash, the planet braced for yet another shift. Tectonic activity began to fracture Pangaea, birthing the nascent continents of the Americas, Europe, and Africa. This fragmentation not only fundamentally altered Earth's geography, but also catalyzed an unprecedented burst of biodiversity. The Triassic functioned as the ultimate crucible of beginnings. If the Cambrian ignited the inaugural hunt, the Devonian heralded the age of fishes, and the Permian pressured existence with ash and flame. Then the Triassic served as the theater of total rebirth. Survivors of the apocalypse had emerged more robust, intelligent, and prepared for a dominance that would span the next 150 million years. From these small-bodied Triassic pioneers, the dinosaurs would ascend to reach heights that rivaled the ancient gods. The planet was poised to step into its most magnificent chapter, the Jurassic, an epoch where true titans commanded the land, the seas, and the very air, roughly 201 million years ago. Following the survival of the Triassic small-bodied dinosaurs through planetary chaos, the world underwent a metamorphosis. The atmosphere clarified, and a humid, balmy climate enveloped the globe. Towering forests comprised of cycads and ferns rose to heights of dozens of feet, cultivating a lush, emerald world where the reign of the dinosaurs was truly inaugurated. This was the Jurassic, the golden age of gigantism. From the deep jungles to the sprawling plains, and from the winding river systems to the boundless oceans, the entire planet reverberated with life. The forest floor groaned under the weight of herbivores massive enough to tip the scales at tens of tons, while predators stalked through the shadows, their roars shattering the tranquility. The world had been claimed by the dinosaurs across the primordial plains. The Brachiosaurus moved with a rhythmic, steady cadence. Standing nearly 50 feet high and weighing upwards of 65,000 pounds, it carried its cranium high like a bell tower peering over the canopy. With its neck extended to such dizzying heights, it could graze on foliage unreachable by any other inhabitant. When a herd traveled in unison, the entire forest appeared to undulate a living, breathing mural of tranquility and immense power elsewhere. The armored Stegosaurus lumbered slowly across the exposed ground. Its dorsal region was adorned with two parallel rows of massive, vertical plates, while its tail bristled with 4 deadly, 3-foot spikes. These were not mere anatomical curiosities. They functioned as a potent symbolic warning to any hunter reckless enough to close the distance. in a world where survival was defined by sheer mass. Even the act of plant consumption was elevated to an art of endurance. This fragile peace, however, was regularly punctuated by the arrival of a killer. Moving with a silent, menacing grace, a creature nearly 16 feet tall and of equal length would stalk from the tree line, its gaze fixed upon its target. This was the Allosaurus, the Jurassic's premier apex predator, the true master of the territory. Though lacking the colossal proportions of the Cretaceous Tyrannosaurus rex, the Allosaurus possessed distinct advantages: agility and strategic intelligence. Equipped with a powerful neck, highly flexible mandibles, and elongated, muscular legs, it was built for rapid pursuit. Paleontologists working in the United States have discovered prey skeletons bearing the bite marks of multiple Allosaurus, providing definitive evidence that they hunted in coordinated, wolf-like packs. The nightmare was not confined to the land. The Jurassic oceans were equally lethal, measuring over 80 feet in length and weighing in at tens of tons. Liopleurodon stood as one of the most significant marine predators in geological history. Its jaws were expansive enough to engulf a great white shark in a single, clean bite. An olfactory sense so sharp allowed it to detect a trace of blood from miles away. Each powerful stroke of its tail generated waves that crashed like oceanic storms, causing the very waters to tremble while Liopleurodon prowled. No sea-dwelling creature was truly safe. This represented a moment when Earth seemed to achieve a perfect, radiant equilibrium, a thriving, vibrant planet, perhaps the most flourishing since the dawn of life. Yet, as with every golden era in our history, this stability was destined to be fleeting. Tectonic forces continued to grind, triggering volcanic outbursts and altering global climates. Gradually, the Jurassic Titans were confronted with newer, fiercer, and more highly adapted rivals. As the Jurassic drew to a close, Earth positioned itself for an even more spectacular and brutal transition: the Cretaceous. The era when the ultimate sovereigns of the dinosaur age would finally rise: Tyrannosaurus rex, Spinosaurus, and Mosasaurus were waiting in the wings, the definitive icons of destruction and power. Approximately 145 million years ago, our planet ascended into the Cretaceous, an epoch defined by its intense biological fervor and sheer majesty. Forests flourished from pole to pole as the climate remained perennially balmy and saturated with moisture, fostering a landscape where insect populations surged. Above all, however, the dinosaurs solidified their absolute hegemony, having refined themselves into creatures of unparalleled size, predatory cunning, and raw ferocity. Within the marshy lowlands and tangled woodlands of ancient North America, one identity emerged that caused all other life to shudder: Tyrannosaurus rex, the sovereign of the tyrant lizards, towering over 13 feet at the hip, stretching 43 feet from snout to tail, and packing nearly 18,000 pounds of mass. The T. Rex remains the most formidable terrestrial killer to ever traverse the globe. A single snap of its jaws generated over 35,000 newtons of pressure, the crushing equivalent of a contemporary main battle tank. Its 12-inch long teeth, rather than being merely razor-edged, were subtly curved to ensure that massive swaths of muscle were torn away with every strike. One bite alone was typically sufficient to condemn its quarry to a swift death through exsanguination. Yet the legendary status of the T. Rex was not solely a product of its savage might. Its brain case contained a cerebrum far larger than that of its carnivorous peers, and its olfactory bulbs were so finely tuned that carrion could be detected from 6 miles away by virtue of forward-oriented orbits. It possessed binocular vision, granting the T. Rex lethal depth perception and impeccable accuracy during the heat of an attack. If the T. Rex presided over the land, a rival ruler claimed its own dominion across the riverine corridors and swamplands of ancient Africa Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, reaching an astounding 50 to 60 feet in length and outweighing the T-Rex at over 20,000 pounds. It holds the distinction of being the most massive carnivorous dinosaur ever documented. Diverging from its strictly terrestrial kin, the Spinosaurus functioned as both a proficient swimmer and an opportunistic hunter. Featuring webbed appendages, a crocodile-like cranium bristling with conical teeth, and a dorsal sail, peaking at nearly 6 feet. It existed as a bizarre chimera of land-dwelling dinosaur and aquatic predator. It would submerge itself to stalk enormous fish, only to emerge on the banks to rest. Evolutionary history has never produced a semi-aquatic sovereign quite as adaptable as this. Whether roaming the riverbanks to hunt smaller dinosaurs or diving into the currents to feed, the Spinosaurus left nothing but prey in its wake. Meanwhile, hidden beneath the churning, opaque depths of the Cretaceous oceans, a different nightmare waited in the gloom. Spanning nearly 56 feet and armed with maws lined with serrated blades, the Mosasaurus functioned as the uncontested master of the ancient seas. Its physiology mirrored a serpentine cross between a reptile and a shark, featuring an immense cranium, a propulsion-ready tail, and broad flippers optimized for velocity. Sharks, plesiosaurs, and ichthyosaurs alike were swallowed whole by this terror of the deep, while the terrestrial and marine worlds were governed by these behemoths. The Cretaceous skies signaled a profound evolutionary breakthrough, the emergence of the first primitive birds. Archaeopteryx, a feathered, pint-sized creature still possessing a reptilian tail and sharp teeth, represented the crucial bridge between dinosaurs and the modern avian world. By gliding through the canopy to escape ground-dwelling killers, it pioneered a new survival strategy, marking the inaugural time that life truly mastered the firmament. From this lineage, a branch of life sprouted that would eventually outlive all the giants roughly 66 million years ago. However, the sky ignited. A celestial intruder, exceeding 6 miles in diameter, slammed into the planet at 43,000 miles per hour, striking the region we now identify as the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Energy equivalent to billions of atomic weapons was released by the impact. Within mere minutes, firestorms incinerated everything across thousands of square miles. For months, toxic gases and volcanic soot choked the atmosphere. Extinguishing the sunlight, flora perished, ecosystems fractured, and the bedrock of the food chain disintegrated. As if by cosmic decree, the entire dinosaurian empire was erased. Yet, this extinction served as the crucible for a new age. Tiny survivors birds, diminutive reptiles, and most significantly, the mammals began a slow ascent toward dominance. A fresh natural cycle had been set in motion. The Cenozoic era, the age of mammals, dawned upon the Earth. Several million years after the dinosaurs had faded, a monstrous predator emerged across the primal plains of Asia Andrisarchus, resembling a terrifying fusion of a hippopotamus and a wolf. This beast reached nearly 13 feet in length, sporting a cranium the size of a tabletop and massive, curved teeth capable of snapping bone with ease. Neither a dinosaur nor a standard mammalian carnivore, Andrisarchus belonged to a long-vanished lineage of meat-eating mammals that shared a distant, surprising kinship with contemporary cetaceans. It reigned as the inaugural apex hunter of the post-dinosaur era, patrolling arid, sun-scorched landscapes in search of sustenance. Tens of millions of years later, as the Earth slipped into the grip of the Pleistocene, vast grasslands and frozen tundra began to carpet North and South America. This was the dominion of Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, an entity etched forever into the pantheon of iconic predators. Standing roughly 4 feet at the shoulder and tipping the scales at 660 pounds, it possessed the sheer weight of a modern lion. Its true legend, however, resided in those two immense canines. Extending nearly 8 inches, these dagger-like fangs were not designed for the crude work of tearing meat. Instead, they served as surgical tools meant to be driven deep into a victim's throat. Severing vital arteries in mere moments, Smilodon did not engage in long-distance pursuits. Rather, it relied on concealment, striking with a single, clinical, and lethal burst of energy. Pack cooperation, much like that seen in modern lions, likely enhanced their efficiency. Yet every attack was executed with the icy, calculated precision of a surgeon's scalpel. They were challenged by other titans of the Ice Age, the woolly rhinoceros, the mammoth, and the colossal short-faced bear, Arctodus, which could tower 10 feet high when it rose on its hind legs. While the continents lay shrouded in frost, the oceans witnessed the emergence of an even more supreme sovereign Megalodon, the largest shark ever to have patrolled the depths. Spanning 60 feet and weighing over 130,000 pounds, it possessed a maw capable of consuming an adult whale in its entirety. Its teeth were sized like human hands serrated, razor-sharp blades of bone. When Megalodon swung its jaw open, spanning nearly 10 feet, it unleashed a bite force capable of pulverizing a whale's ribcage with a single snap. It functioned as the undisputed emperor of the Cenozoic seas, preying upon giant turtles, archaic whales, and any other creature foolish enough to enter its territory. Today, fossilized whale vertebrae still display the gouges of Megalodon teeth, wounds so expansive that a person's entire hand could be inserted into the cavity. But as the immutable rhythm of nature dictates, even the age of the Leviathans had to eventually bow to something less physically imposing, yet far more catastrophic, roughly 300,000 years ago. Within the dense canopy of Africa, an upright walking primate stepped onto the stage of history. This was Homo sapiens' modern humanity, lacking both fangs and talons. These beings were armed instead with the tools of strategy, linguistic complexity, and collective cooperation. Piece by piece, humanity brought every environment under its heel, from the frozen tundra and arid deserts to the densest jungles. The entire planet eventually submitted. They lured mammoths into traps, outmaneuvered the saber-toothed cats, and asserted themselves as the inaugural true super-predators in the history of the world. Ironically, humans remain the only creatures gifted with the capacity to facilitate the total extinction of others. They strike not with biological weaponry, but with the chilling efficacy of technology and tactical fire. Having evolved from the most vulnerable of life forms, they have ascended to become the most lethal entity this planet has ever nurtured. Scattered remains of those ancient kings serve as a permanent reminder: Megalodon teeth embedded in stone, Smilodon skeletons locked in permafrost, and the faint, haunting echoes of Androsarchus woven into the complex songs of modern whales. Every fossilized relic stands as a testament to the fact that dominance is merely a passing phase, whereas evolution is an eternal process. From the Anomalocaris patrolling the Cambrian depths and the Tyrannosaurus rex stalking the Cretaceous canopy to the Megalodon reigning over the Cenozoic tides, each serves as a vital chapter in the grand epic of existence. Now, the human race is drafting the subsequent volume, not with sharpened teeth or rending claws, but with the weight of ambition and the reach of our intellect. The Earth has witnessed the rise and collapse of innumerable empires. The final, pressing question remains: will the current apex predator, humankind, manage to escape the same fate that claimed every sovereign that stood before us?